Welcome everybody.
Welcome. So we're going to present a double act between Francis and myself, Tony. Sessions planned to go on for about 45 minutes, but we can adjust that as we go. So can I just check? So your screen is sharing? Fine. My laptop's not cooperating with Teams at the moment, so Rosie and I are sharing. Let's go to the next page then. So hopefully you can all see the agenda. So I'll start by introducing the session. That should only take a few minutes. I'll introduce Francis, who's going to talk first. Francis has got some material that he's going to share, really slide-based and setting some backdrop for global CCS as it's happening today, technology, give a case study on a cluster. I'm then going to take over for a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing and the problems that people are facing in trying to solve carbon capture projects, and some of the things that we're starting to see and hear about what people are trying to do in the future and how we do that. And I'll give a brief demo on some of the tools that we're developing to try and tackle some of these issues. And then really to wrap up our presentation, I'll show you how you can get more feature information, which we can also post in the chat as well. We've got a very brief poll, and then we want to allow some quite generous time for Q&A at the end. So any burning questions you've got, you can fire in and we'll address. If you go to the next slide. So in terms of housekeeping, so this is primarily some slides that we're going to talk through. Francis will talk, I will talk, I'll give a live demo. This is all being recorded, just for everybody's information. The way the Q&A is going to work, so in Teams there is a Q&A facility there. So as we talk through, feel free to post your questions. And then we'll answer those at the end. So I think, Rosie, you're going to moderate the questions and have a look, and you can pick some out. I think the way we'll do that, we'll invite people to, I guess, read out the question if you want, or you can raise your hand and Rosie can unmute you. So by default, I think everybody's muted. When it's time for Q&A, we can unmute people. We'll keep the chat function, I think, for anything that we may want to share. So we may decide to share a link, but otherwise the questions will all be through Q&A. Good. Okay. So let me introduce Francis then. In fact, I think I've got a second slide. Okay. So this is really introducing kind of Francis and myself. So we're two organizations that are working quite closely together. We're collaborating. So MapStand is a boutique research organization specializing in researching up-to-date data sets, mapping energy infrastructure, and making that data available to others. So that's what MapStand do. And as all sites, we take data and we turn that into derived insights, and we make web applications where people can really derive their own insights on certain sectors or industries or locations. So we're all about web applications and helping organizations understand projects. And we've decided that I think between MapStand's capabilities and AllSight's capabilities, they're complementary. We've got different backgrounds, but really trying to tackle the same problem. It's made sense for us to work together and solve problems that way. So really trying to drive efficiency and speed and deliver new products. So let's introduce Francis then. So Francis has got 16 years experience working in energy, a geologist by training, worked for both oil companies and service companies before founding MapStand. And myself, Tony, I worked in the oil and gas industry for almost 25 years. My background's process engineering and engineering management, all phases of project development, offshore and onshore. So that's the introductions then. Let's hand over to Francis to talk. So I think, Rosie, you're going to drive the slides. Francis will talk. Over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the introduction, Tony, and welcome everybody. As this is a really short session designed to fit into your lunch breaks, we'll be covering a lot of different topics, but only, really touching on them, as this is obviously a huge and complex subject. And I'm sure some of you would like to go into a lot more detail on the specifics of the different things that we touch on. And you can use the Q&A or the chat to let us know kind of what that is and questions, and we could, develop new content and do more of these on detailed topics, or answer them specifically for you. So really what this is going to be is a whistle-stop tour talking about the data sets that we're building and what that tells us all about what is happening in the CCUS industry globally. Just a little bit about why Mapstand is involved in this. As Tony mentioned, we're a small research firm. We've been around for 5 years, and we focus on building spatial data sets, mapping data sets, and we make these available to our customers. We also have a free viewer, which all of you can sign up to. I hope all of you have done already, which you can find on our website, and I think Tony will share the link later. So we as a business maintain nearly 50 different data layers that cover power generation, power transmission, and oil and gas infrastructure. And the infrastructure component covers both kind of upstream, midstream, and some downstream. These data layers in recent times have started to be viewed by our customers in very, very different ways, as across the board people are engaging with energy transition. And it's really kind of brought a new lease of life to a lot of these data sets, where people are now looking at existing infrastructure and trying to understand and reimagine how we're going to rebuild energy systems of the future. So one of the things that we're most focused on and spending most of our time on at the moment is rebuilding our data to really highlight how CCUS or how hydrogen, as an overall system can work, the reuse of pipelines, the reuse of offshore assets. And as part of this, we've obviously had to do a lot of research into one of the key things that we're dealing with here, which is carbon, CO2 emissions. So looking at the CO2 emissions across the value chain of power, so power generation, but also other industrial emitters, understanding how these can all fit together. And we're now doing a lot of work trying to understand the projects, trying to understand the project life cycles and all of the bits of infrastructure that goes into building these. What you can see on the screen is a map here. This is a map of the east coast of the UK, and we'll talk a little bit about the clusters in the UK. And the map is showing in the purples and greens the CO2 emissions, and in blue the proposed or planned CO2 pipelines taking captured CO2 off to the offshore licenses, which are the brown areas on the map there. And this is just a sort of highlight of some of the data sets that we're working on, and it's viewed in the Mapstand Hub product. The next slide, please, Rosie. So what is going on in CCUS today, so looking out globally? 2022 was an enormous growth year for the industry. I mean, absolutely staggering number of announcements in terms of capture and also storage. We saw over 200 megatons of CO2 storage projects announced globally. This is in over 40 different countries with I'll show you in a minute, but with the US and Europe really dominating, but we're seeing CCUS developed globally. Capture projects. So this is capture from existing emitters or yet to be built emitters. Is up over 400 megatons a year capture capacity. So this is from our project tracking database, which is quite an extraordinary amount from where we were just a few years ago. A lot of these projects, or the early projects that we've seen to date, pilot projects, and also capture projects that we see in existence today, are what we've called source to store. These are generally projects where you have a single provider that is, capturing, shipping, and storing CO2 as part of, for instance, EOR. Enhanced oil recovery, which has really sort of dominated the early years of storing or sequestering carbon, especially in the US. But what we're seeing recently is some really interesting new kind of business models and ways of developing the industry emerging. We see decarbonisation clusters, which of course in the UK we've been hearing so much about in recent years, where we have quite a diverse grouping of different companies coming together, developing a shared industry, a shared strategy to decarbonise specific areas or industrial areas. And within these groupings, you'll have both emitters, transport companies, and also the stores working together. What we also see is other business models emerging, which are more industry-led carbon market type models, which only look at specific elements of this value chain. For instance, the pipeline and transportation part, or the storage part. So we see the kind of ship to store type markets opening up and already functioning in Norway, where CO2 emissions can be taken from almost anywhere to a centralized storage facility. Next slide, please. So looking at the global spread and growth of capture projects, what we see in the graph here is the projects that we have in our database between now and 2030, so the growth of projects, and the colours on the graph, on the bar graph, show the sort of stage of the project. So we're seeing projects throughout the kind of project life cycle, between now and 2030, given a 4 or 5 times growth in terms of the capacity. And at the rate at which we are seeing project announcements, this is a significant underestimate. Looking at where these projects are based, it's no surprise that the US is dominating this quite enormously. But what we're also seeing is the UK, probably in second place there, which is quite an extraordinary feat, considering the relative size of our sort of industries and the position that we're in. Next slide. One of the things that we're doing alongside understanding projects is trying to understand a little bit about the technologies that are being implemented and the companies involved in developing carbon capture technology. So this is I'm not going to go into any real detail on the methodologies of capturing CO2. This slide here has lots of logos on, so if you're interested in researching and finding out about some of the technologies that are kind of being employed or marketed to the industry, this can be a place to sort of start. But what we are seeing is a very, very fast development of new and proprietary capture solutions. This comes as sort of technology licensing, where companies are developing bespoke techniques which they're licensing to engineering firms or industrial suppliers, but also capture as a service business models, where industrial emitters are able to essentially buy in plug and play services to capture CO2. The other really interesting thing is direct air capture, which is an enormous kind of growth market as well. And obviously, we're not dealing directly with emitters here, but what we see is this is an important component where you're sort of holistically looking at a company that is emitting huge amounts of CO2, but dealing potentially with very hard to capture emissions. We're seeing this sort of, I guess, DSE market as potential offsetting within their portfolios. So it creates a very sort of interesting mix of how companies will commit to or what they will need to do to succeed in their commitments for things like net zero. On this list here, I'll just kind of pick out a few of them here. But Carbon Clean, Spanter Ion, Clean Energy, Entropy, Honeywell, providing really interesting sort of carbon capture as a service to emitters. So Honeywell's an interesting one. I'm going to sort of talk a little bit in a later slide about EnLink in the US, but they're working, for instance, with EnLink, who are planning a CO2 infrastructure project in Louisiana. They're working with them to basically supply, capture technology to plug into their pipeline networks. Really interesting business models. We're also seeing companies like Storegga, Summit Carbon Solutions, Horizon Energy, developing CO2 transport and storage infrastructure solutions. And companies like Aker Carbon Capture, with full spectrum, CO2 business models, supporting companies, across the value chain. Next slide, please. This slide is just having a little zoom in to the zero carbon Humber, or the Humber area in the UK, and having a look at some of the MapStan data. The top image on the right, it sort of looks like one image, but it's two. The top image is the map, and this is taken from MapStan Hub. And the lower image is a Power BI dashboard, which just goes in and starts to expose some of these attributes in our data sets to really highlight some of the sort of key interesting points here. So the hub business model, which has really been deployed in the UK, and we see it in other parts of Europe as well, where we have huge government backing for industrial clusters to basically go ahead and decarbonize. And this means a number of very, very different things for different industry sectors. So hydrogen, which is something we're not talking about today, but is a key component there. And CCUS is also critical in all of the clusters in the UK. There are two main clusters, the East Coast and the West Coast cluster, which got phase one of funding, of fast-track funding, and these projects are made up of really complex components, and parts of these are now moving forward in FEED and beyond. The cluster projects in the UK have a whole host of different emitters, hydrogen and capture and infrastructure, all bound together with the storage offshore. The blue hydrogen component is very, very interesting in all of this, because if you look at all of the UK clusters, what you see is that the blue hydrogen is one of the key ways in which you basically concentrate CO2 emissions close into your clusters. Many of the UK clusters, no longer have as much CO2 localized as you'd maybe want, and definitely not compared to some of the US clusters. So hydrogen actually supplies the largest amount of CO2 that we see being sequestered from the clusters. And following that, we have new power plants, waste to energy plants, but also retrofitting existing emitters with capture technology. These projects are incredibly complex, and the timing and sequencing of infrastructures, stores, captures, and new plants coming on stream, I think is going to mean that we're going to see very varying success in terms of delivery of these projects, but we're seeing huge and exciting changes, and one of the jobs that we have is really trying to unpick that and understand really where each of these projects is and kind of what it means for the overall success of the cluster. The graphs on the right show where, so in the box graph, I'm not controlling the mouse here, so I can't highlight it, but yeah, there we go. Yeah, so what we see there is the hydrogen production within zero carbon Humber. So that's 4,000 megawatts equivalent gigawatts, and the CO2 captured, up near 20 megatons a year, and this is really dominated by the Drax bioenergy CCS project. Moving on to the US. No, that's perfect. Thank you, Rosie. Oh, can we go on the next slide? There we go. Moving on to the US to have a look at some other sort of business models. This is the current and planned future US CO2 infrastructure. So on the map, what we can see is CO2 emissions, which are giving us the heat map color. And then in the blue, we have the existing CO2 pipelines. So there are a couple of players that really dominate this market. We have Denbury, which we see in Louisiana and Texas, as well as in the north. Kinder Morgan with a huge pipeline CO2 network, and it's slightly lighter, so it's harder to see. But some really interesting projects. Such as the Navigator CO2 project, the Summit Carbon Solutions, which is a planned project connecting over 30 bioethanol plants across Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska, which is over 3,000 miles, 3,000 kilometers of new CO2 pipelines, gathering and storing CO2 from all of these projects. So what we're seeing in the US is something very different to what we're seeing in the UK. We're seeing a relatively mature market in the sense that there is very widespread existing CO2 transportation, but also a lot of companies that are already involved and understand this. Next slide, please. A great example of this, and it's what I call the sort of infrastructure-led business model, is EnLink. So EnLink is a major gas pipeline operator across Texas and Louisiana, and they have a vision basically to become the CO2 transporter of choice. So what you see in the little sort of diagram at the bottom on the right there is a sort of a highlight of their business model. They are looking to basically build a central compressor facility and pipeline facility that connects a low pressure gathering system from key emission areas. So we're basically looking at the bright colours on the map above. So from a sort of Baton Rouge down to St. Charles industrial areas, and then taking this CO2 for a fee and delivering it through a high pressure system to storage sites in the coastal areas, which again are third party storage systems. So we're not seeing hubs in the same way as we are in the UK. This is a much more broken down marketplace. So EnLink has already contracted out CO2 delivery, I guess, to the markets, and you can see they really, see themselves as having developed real first mover advantage in terms of developing out this business model. The sort of graphic dashboard in the top right is from the Mapstand Hub again, and here we can see their overall pipeline network. And what we've done is we've built just a 5 kilometre buffer around their gas pipelines and had a look at what all of the CO2 emitters that sit within that area, and highlighted on the graphics to the right are all of the gas plants. And what we really see is just one of these suppliers here has access, in real close proximity to its infrastructure, enormous amounts of CO2. And this sort of infrastructure-led business model is something that we're obviously seeing developing very quickly in the States, but we are also starting to see in Europe as well. I already mentioned, in Norway, where you're focusing on, as storage and shipping as a transport. So that was my whistle-stop tour through the data sets and what we're seeing in global CCS development. So over to you, Tony.
Great, thank you, Francis. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we see that are problematic to initiating, developing, and turning these kind of things into real projects. So I'll go through them. So I think fundamentally, with this kind of complexity of information, that's spread across space, but also different time horizons, or people struggle with this anyway. Organizations often struggle with it. But when this stuff is changing pretty much on a weekly basis, it's really hard to keep up. So that's one of the challenges we're looking to address. I think organizations that still use spreadsheets and PowerPoints to plan complex developments, they will have difficulties in understanding the overall doability and that interconnectedness of different aspects of development, particularly across regional hubs and national scenes. I think the question of, does a project make sense in any case is quite a hard organizational and stakeholder question to answer. It always involves, integration of technical and commercial doability, fit with policy. Can you access infrastructure? Can you get a grid connection? Can you get across land and things like that? And particularly in energy transition, many of these things are moving and uncertain. We know that help is available for these things, usually through consultancy studies. This is the traditional route. It takes quite a long time. There are insights providers as well, which quite often sit behind a high paywall. But what we found is that these kind of services, they're not accessible, perhaps to smaller organizations looking to understand this. So I believe that tools to be able to see what the data is saying and then actually derive your own insights on that data as things evolve, that they're quite sparse, and I think this is the gap that between us we're trying to fill. And so the kind of demand that we're seeing is really tools to explore different scenarios, make comparisons between different pathways, aggregate clusters, in a very visual, quick way, and be able to screen things and benchmark globally. So that's what we see. Some of the insights and the feedback that we're starting to hear, I guess, hear from the work we do, and even this week we were in the UK CCS Research Centre conference, which was down in Cardiff, and a lot of these themes are coming across. So I think a lot of organisations have kind of moved beyond, I think, trying to understand and solve, things like unit economics for carbon capture, how does the technology and the economics fit together? You know, this is a big conversation kind of 1 to 2 years ago. I think people are moving beyond that. So some of the things that I guess we're hearing more and more of as CCS developments are unfolding. So one is that geographically dispersed emissions need more creative solutions. So, you know, pipelines don't always work for all locations. If a CO2 emitter is dispersed, you know, you may be looking at a combination of rail and trucks and, you know, maybe some bits of pipelines. So it needs to be a bit more creative. But the flip side of that is that it actually offers more flexibility, some more different options, you know, that maybe allow you to do a development in a less constrained way. So that's kind of an interesting thing that's unfolding. So the fit with national policy and international policy is really important. You know, I think people are looking to understand this across different boundaries more and more. Yeah, international shipping of CO2 across boundaries, really important. So understanding that legal framework is something that people are talking about. I heard this week, you know, people wanting to have more conversations about kind of smaller and more local storage sites. I know these are challenging technically, but I think there's a feeling that some of this has perhaps been overlooked. Grid connections, yeah, these have been recognised as constraining factors for many developments, and you know, understanding that's really important. And then a big theme is you know, storytelling in particular is really important to get stakeholder engagement and get authorities and partners on board. Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So I'll give you a very quick demo, just to explain what we have. So we do have a geospatial web application. So it takes mostly map stand data, kind of revisualizes it in a different way. They're really focused on project development and screening. What's inside that? So it's visualization of the locations of things. You know, what's where, how big, how far away. Allows you to really understand network connections and boundaries and things in a visual way. So that's a static data. So we give this away as a public preview at the moment. So that's available for anybody to go and have a look at. There are things like measuring tools, aggregation, so cluster analysis, filtering, the ability to explore scenarios, which are not in the public version. And currently we hold a lot of this stuff in Power BI dashboards, but it uses all the same data. So what I'm going to attempt to do is right, how do we
Stop sharing.
I'll stop sharing and then I'll reshare. Okay, are you able to see this? So if I just explain what we have then, I mean, this is just a global map, but then what we built on is different layers. So you can look at CO2 emissions, for example. Just wait for this to load up. So we can add country boundaries. Just wondering why the data is not coming up.
I think the video call will be taking all your bandwidth. Give it a moment.
Must be
They do say never do a live demo. This is strange. We're not getting any data at all.
No, there we go.
So this is normally really quick, by the way. When I use it on my mobile, and that comes up straight away. Right, let's try again. So if I load up the CO2 emissions layer, okay, that's coming up. And I'll just add a couple of others as a starter. So, you know, let's pick, you know, part of the UK and bits of Europe. So kind of model things as in, you know, blobs that get bigger, but also extruded things into 3D. So if you're interested in a certain area and you want to look across the horizon, it just gives you a much clearer view on what that clustering looks like. You know, what's big, what's small, what's far away. Yeah, so the height there is proportional to the emission size. And if you want to know more information about the actual location, you can zoom in, and what we should see is that the kind of background view gets replaced with aerial imagery, and you just get a much better sense of what's there. Let's see if that loads up. It is loading up, it's just quite slow. Yeah, so if you're interested in, you know, does this location have jetty facilities or, you know, railways nearby? Tons of information there. And then in addition to that, the kind of data that we get from Mapstand, if you're interested in pipeline transmission, so how can you move this stuff around? Where's the power to run some of these facilities? Then that's quite easy to switch on and off as well. And let's see if some of that will pop up. Yeah, so you should see that, you know, that rich complexity of networks that are there, and networks that are planned to be installed in the future. You know, these start to show up, and all these points. You know, you click on something, and the attribute comes up. So same for emissions, same for projects. So we can switch off CO2 emissions, switch on CCS developments and hydrogen developments. Maybe just switch off the electric, because that's quite heavy. And what you should see is that the same kind of data specific for CCS projects and hydrogen will pop up. So it's just being a little bit slow. So this is global. So yeah, Francis has talked about, you know, clusters in the US, clusters in the UK. This is mapped globally, so anywhere in the world that you're interested in, you can go around and have a look at. So that's been particularly slow. So what I'll probably do is move on to the analytic dashboard. So what the analytic dashboard does, Tony,
I think
let's
it's
try again.
Yeah.
If this doesn't work, we'll abandon the demo.
I think it's worth saying that the AllSites iMap you can gain access to from AllSites website, so you can go in your own time and have a play with that. So, you know, Tony showed you the sort of basic controls there. But it's absolutely fantastic mapping visualizations that I think all of you self-selected to be here will be very interested in having a play with. So it's a little bit addictive, so be careful.
And it does normally work a lot faster than that.
It's quite addictive, right? So I'm going to abandon the live demo because for whatever reason it's not loading up. Normally it's super quick, but what we'll do, let's go back to the slides. and yeah, I'll just show you where that stuff is available. This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this gives you, these are the snapshots of what the Mapstand app and our app looks like. So for further information, yeah, Mapstand on the website, they've got a contact us form and details. We've got the same, so it's mapstand.com, contact us, allsites.com, contact, app.mapstand.com, and then allsitesi.com for our visualization. Oh, right. Right, so we've got a couple of, you're going to put the poll questions up, Rosie? And then what we'll do, we'll go to Q&A. What I was going to say, and so any of the questions, we'd be happy to try and answer these, I guess, through the tools we have, as data and speed allows. Are they both up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, we just put two poll questions there. So first one's, what's the biggest hurdle, in your view, is there for CCS deployment? And they should come up as a word cloud. And then the second one, which should be multi-choice, is what tools or features would make your life easier? So I'll give people a couple of minutes to have a look through that. Yeah, cost is coming up as a big theme. Cost, and I guess who's going to pay for that cost? Okay, so a few issues coming up there for regulatory policies, regulatory issues, commercial models, which are kind of linked, legacy wells. Development time, yeah. Public opinion. In fact, one of the sessions this week in Cardiff was about public opinion. I didn't go to that one, but it seems to be important, I think, when you're putting CO2 pipelines and trains through people's gardens. Is everybody able to see the results of these as they come up? Just wanted to check that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, and yes.
Yeah. Okay. How do we see the results of the multi-choice?
Nobody's answered it.
Okay, fine. Oh yeah, they have. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So for the second question, then we start to see responses for measuring tools. So distance to grid, distance to coast, information on development partners, contractors. Yeah, good. So I think as you're finishing off the poll questions, you can carry on going with that if you like. It'd be good to go. It'd be good to see what questions may have been posted already. Nothing yet. Okay. Fine. So if anybody wants to post a question before we wrap up, please go ahead, and we can see if we can answer it. I'm just going to see if this thing's actually loaded up yet.
So yeah, we'll wrap this call up in a second. Any further questions, you know where to contact us, you know, or please ask on LinkedIn. The demos are available for free through each of our websites. So you know, please go and have an explore and try for yourself, and hopefully that will trigger some additional questions that you can get back to us with. You know, part of opening up data and opening up tools to all of you lot is about engagement. It's about getting feedback. It's about opening conversations. You know, that's why they're there. And you know that we get a lot of feedback that they're really useful. But you know, please let us know what you're doing with them and what you'd like us to do. And you know, that's how we'll all move forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, thanks for joining. Yeah, it's a shame the live demo didn't quite work out the way we planned. Not sure why. Yeah, I guess it was a video. If there are no questions, then yeah, if there's any final questions, we'll answer them. If not, then I suggest that we wrap up. We're going to put the video. So I think we've got the video recorded. We'll tidy it up. We'll put that on YouTube. We can share the link. And then the slides that we have, happy to send that around as well. So we can send that around all participants. Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for your time. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your lunch. Take care.